Welcome back to Void of Fears. Before we jump into today's story, I've got to ask for a quick favour. If you could smash that like button, drop a comment below, and hit subscribe if you haven't already. It seriously makes a huge difference. YouTube's algorithm loves that stuff, and it pushes my videos to new viewers who might dig these stories too. I really appreciate every single one of you who takes the time to do that. It means the world to me and helps keep this channel growing. Alright, enough of me rambling. Let's dive into today's story. I'm sitting in my office at 3 in the morning because sleep doesn't come easy anymore. Not when you've been carrying a secret like this for 41 years. My name is Dr. Leonard Harrison. I'm 78 years old, and I worked for NASA's propulsion division from 1972 until 1998. What I'm about to tell you will sound impossible, but I have the proof. Boxes of it. Documents that were supposed to be destroyed decades ago. And tonight, I'm going to tell you everything, because I don't have much time left, and this secret has been eating me alive since 1984. It started on July 20th, 1976, the day Viking 1 touched down on Mars. I was at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, celebrating with everyone else. Champagne bottles popping, engineers hugging, technicians crying with joy. We'd done it. America had successfully landed a functioning spacecraft on the surface of Mars, and I had helped design part of the landing system. I was 30 years old and felt like I was on top of the world. I remember thinking that nothing could ever top that moment. I was wrong. 5 days later, everything changed. On July 25th, Viking 1's orbiter photographed a region called Cydonia while searching for a landing site for Viking 2. The images came through around 2 p.m. I was in the imaging lab because I wanted to see the raw data as it arrived, still riding high from our success. The room was packed with scientists and engineers, everyone chattering excitedly about where Viking 2 should touch down. Then, Thomas Much, the head of the Viking imaging team, went completely silent. He was staring at one particular photograph, frame number 035A72, and his face had gone from excited pink to ash white in the span of seconds. I moved closer and looked over his shoulder. There in the center of the image was a mesa. A hill really, nothing that should have been remarkable. But the way the shadows fell across it, the way the afternoon light hit at that precise angle, it looked exactly like a human face, not approximately, not kind of, exactly. 2 eyes with perfect symmetry, a nose with nostrils, a mouth, even what looked like a helmet or headdress. It was staring up at us from the surface of Mars with an expression that seemed almost serene. The room went quiet. Someone laughed nervously. Someone else said it was just pareidolia, the human tendency to see faces in random patterns. Gerald Soffen, the Viking project scientist, immediately took control of the situation. He looked at the image for maybe 10 seconds, then turned to all of us with a dismissive smile and said it was clearly just a trick of light and shadow. Nothing more. He even made jokes about it, trying to break the tension in the room. When NASA released the image to the press a week later, the press release called it a huge rock formation that resembles a human head. Everyone laughed it off. The media had fun with it for a day or two, then moved on to other stories. But 3 days after that photograph was taken, Thomas Much pulled me into a classified briefing room on the 3rd floor of the JPL building. It was just the two of us in a windowless room that smelled like stale coffee and old paper. He locked the door behind us, which immediately made my stomach tighten. Tom was a good man, a brilliant geologist, and he looked terrified. He spread out dozens of other images across the table, images I'd never seen before, images that weren't in the public data releases. "Leonard," he said, and his voice was shaking slightly, "I need you to look at these, really look at them, and I need you to tell me I'm not losing my mind." I looked. and what I saw made my hands shake so badly I had to sit down. The face wasn't alone. There were other structures in Cydonia, pyramid shapes with angles too perfect to be natural erosion, formations that lined up with each other in geometric precision across miles of Martian surface. And when Mutt showed me the subsurface penetration radar data that the orbiter had collected, I saw something that turned my blood to ice. Massive tunnel systems beneath the surface, kilometers of them running in straight lines, intersecting at perfect right angles, all of them connecting to enormous chambers beneath the face and the pyramid structures. "These aren't natural," I said, and my voice came out as a whisper. Tom just nodded slowly, and I could see relief in his eyes that I'd confirmed what he was seeing. He pulled out one more photograph, and this one made me stand up so fast my chair fell backward. The image showed an opening at the base of one of the mesas, a dark entrance, perfectly circular, about 15 meters across, and leading away from it, tracks in the Martian soil, not rover tracks, not wind patterns. Something had moved across that soil recently, disturbing the dust in ways that couldn't be explained by any natural process we understood. "Someone needs to go there," Mutt said quietly, looking me directly in the eyes. "Someone needs to find out what this is." I thought he was crazy. I told him so. I said we needed to take this to the full Viking science team, to NASA leadership, to someone with more authority than us. But Tom shook his head and told me he'd already tried. He'd shown these images to Gerald Soffen the day after the face photograph came through. Soffen had confiscated them immediately and told Tom to forget what he'd seen. When Tom pushed back, asking why we wouldn't want to investigate this further, Soffen told him there was already a plan in motion and that Tom should be patient. 3 weeks later, there was a classified meeting at NASA headquarters in Washington. Only 15 people attended. Tom and I flew out together on a military transport. No commercial flights, no paper trail. When we arrived at the conference room, I recognized some faces. Gilbert Levin was there, the scientist who'd run the life detection experiments on Viking. 2 high-ranking Air Force generals I didn't know. Several NASA administrators whose names I'd only seen on classified memos. And a man in a dark suit who never introduced himself and sat at the head of the table like he owned the room. The man in the dark suit stood up, placed both hands on the table, and said 6 words that changed my life forever. "We're going to colonize Mars, immediately." Nobody laughed. Nobody questioned him. The generals nodded, like this was something they'd already discussed. The NASA administrators started taking notes. And Tom and I just sat there stunned as this stranger laid out a plan that sounded like pure science fiction. The program was called Project Lazarus. The budget was $47 billion, hidden inside defense spending allocations over 8 years. Nobody outside that room would know about it. Not Congress, not the press, not even most of NASA. The man in the suit explained that the Cydonia structures represented either the greatest scientific discovery in human history or the greatest threat, and either way we needed people on the ground immediately to investigate. Not a flag and footprints mission, not a temporary research station, a permanent colony, 200 people who would live on Mars and explore those tunnels and find out what the hell was waiting for us there. They built the colony ship in Nevada in a facility north of Groom Lake that officially didn't exist on any map. I was assigned to the propulsion team, and for the next 5 years, I spent more time in the Nevada desert than I did at my own home. My wife thought I was working on classified satellite systems. She wasn't entirely wrong. They called the ship Endeavour Station, and it was the most beautiful piece of engineering I'd ever seen. Massive. Big enough to carry 200 people plus supplies, equipment, prefabricated habitat modules, everything needed for permanent settlement. We used nuclear thermal rockets with chemical backup systems, triple redundancy on every critical component. If something could fail, we designed 2 backup systems for it, We were sending people on a one-way trip, and I was damned if they were going to die because of faulty engineering. The selection process for colonists took 2 years and was ruthlessly thorough. They needed engineers, scientists, doctors, geologists, botanists, psychologists, but they also needed families. This wasn't going to be a military outpost or a research station where everyone went crazy from isolation after 6 months. This was a colony. Children were required. The psychologists insisted on it, said that communities needed children to feel like real homes, to give everyone a sense of future and purpose. 43 children under the age of 18 were selected to go on that mission. I remember watching some of the family interviews through one-way glass. Parents so excited about the opportunity, about being pioneers, about giving their children a chance to be the first Mars generation. The kids were excited too, drawing pictures of what they thought Mars would look like, talking about low gravity and exploring alien landscapes. They had no idea what they were really walking into. None of us did. The mission director was Colonel Raymond Walsh, Air Force, 30 years of service, 2 tours in Vietnam, a master's degree in aerospace engineering from MIT. Hard as nails, but fair. The kind of man who inspired loyalty just by walking into a room. The chief scientist was Dr. Patricia Chen, a planetary geologist who'd worked on the Viking landing site selections and knew the Martian surface better than anyone alive. She was brilliant, passionate, and absolutely convinced that whatever was in Cydonia would rewrite everything we knew about the solar system's history. I liked her immediately. Good people. The best we had. If anyone could make this mission work, it was them. On September 11th, 1983, during a government shutdown when the media was completely distracted by political infighting in Washington, Endeavour Station launched from the Nevada desert. I was there. I watched from a bunker 3 miles away as that beautiful machine I'd helped build lifted off on a pillar of nuclear fire. The launch was visible from Las Vegas, but we'd spent weeks spreading rumors about a new weapons test, so nobody questioned it. Just another secret military project in the Nevada desert. The streak of light in the sky faded, and 200 people began their 4-month journey to Mars. I went home that night and got drunk for the first time in 10 years. On January 3rd, 1984, they landed in Valles Marineris, 47 miles from Cydonia. The touchdown was perfect. Walsh transmitted a simple message back to Earth. Endeavour Station is on Mars. The colony is established. We're home. That last part sent chills down my spine then, and it still does now. We're home. Not we've arrived or mission successful. We're home. Like Mars had been waiting for them. The first 3 weeks went perfectly. Better than perfectly. The colonists set up their habitats faster than projected. The greenhouse modules were operational within 5 days. Water extraction from subsurface ice exceeded expectations. The solar panels and nuclear reactor both performed flawlessly. Dr. Chen's geological surveys identified rich mineral deposits that could support manufacturing. The daily mission logs were optimistic, excited even. Patricia Chen reported that the children were adapting remarkably well to the reduced gravity, running and playing in the habitat corridors, already talking about Mars as home instead of Earth. Colonel Walsh's reports were crisp and efficient. Every milestone met or exceeded. Every system green across the board. For 3 weeks, Project Lazarus looked like humanity's greatest triumph. Then, on January 29th, the communications officer noted something odd in his daily log. Unusual interference on the radio equipment. Feedback during the overnight hours between midnight and 5 a.m. Mars time. Nothing that affected operations, he said, but persistent. Rhythmic almost, like a pulse. He checked all the equipment and found no malfunctions. The interference was coming from outside, somewhere in the Martian environment. He speculated it might be some kind of atmospheric phenomenon we didn't understand yet, maybe related to the thin ionosphere. The log entry was brief, technical, not alarmed, just noting an anomaly for future investigation. On February 3rd, one of the night shift engineers, a man named David Park, reported seeing lights deep in the unexplored tunnel systems to the north of the colony. He'd have been outside doing a routine inspection of the solar panel arrays at 2 a.m. when he saw them. Brief flashes like someone signalling with a flashlight, blue-white light, pulsing 3 times, then darkness. He watched for 20 minutes but didn't see them again. When he mentioned it in his report, Colonel Walsh sent a team to investigate the next day. They found nothing, no equipment malfunctions that could cause light reflections, no natural explanations. The tunnel entrances were still sealed. Nobody had been out there. By February 7th, the colony's medical officer, Dr. Jennifer Blake, noted in her reports that 40% of the colonists were experiencing sleep disturbances. Not insomnia exactly, but vivid dreams. Always the same theme. Walking through dark tunnels towards something bright, something calling them. Several colonists reported waking up disoriented, unsure if they'd been dreaming or if they'd actually gotten up and walked somewhere during the night. 2 people were found sleepwalking, standing at the sealed blast doors that led to the tunnel systems, just standing there in the darkness, facing the doors. When woken up, they couldn't remember leaving their beds. The children started drawing during their art therapy sessions. Their psychologist, Dr. Raymond Torres, collected the drawings and sent scans back to Earth. I've seen them. All of the children, independently without discussing it with each other, drew the same thing. Tall figures with elongated limbs and large heads. Not threatening or scary in their drawings. Just there, standing in the background. Watching. One little girl, Emily Walsh, the Colonel's 8-year-old daughter, drew a picture of herself holding hands with one of these figures. She'd written, at the bottom, in careful letters, "My friend says we used to live here." When her father asked her what she meant, she just smiled and said her friend told her during dreams. Dr. Torres's report classified this as collective stress response, new environment, confined spaces, the psychological weight of being the first Mars colony, normal adjustment issues that would resolve with time and routine counselling. He wasn't worried yet. On February 14th, Valentine's Day back on Earth, though nobody on Mars was celebrating, the drilling team broke through into something that changed everything. They'd been working to expand the colony's footprint, drilling into the rock to create additional storage chambers for supplies and equipment. Lead engineer Russell Kim was supervising the operation. At 3:47 p.m. Mars time, his drill bit, chewing through basalt that was 2 billion years old, suddenly punched through into empty space. The drill lurched forward and Kim barely caught it before it could be damaged. He pulled the bit back and looked at his depth readings, confused. The sensor said they'd drilled through 12 meters of solid rock, but the drill had dropped another 6 meters when it broke through. Empty space. A cavity, but not a small one. Kim's video log from that day still exists in the classified archives. I have a copy on a hard drive hidden in my home. His hands are shaking as he holds the camera, and you can hear his breathing, fast and shallow. "We found something," he says, and his voice cracks. "Jesus Christ, we found something." He pans the camera to show the drill hole, and you can see his team gathering around, shining lights down into the darkness. The hole is too small to see much, but the lights just disappear into blackness. No reflection, no bottom visible. Kim makes a decision right there on camera. He orders his team to widen the hole, to make it large enough for a person to fit through. It takes them 4 hours of careful drilling, expanding the opening while trying not to cause a collapse. When they finally break through completely, the cavity below is revealed to be enormous. The chamber was huge, cathedral-sized, carved from the living rock of Mars, and it wasn't natural. Even in the first shaky camera footage, You could see that the walls were smooth, precisely curved, made of some kind of metallic compound that nobody could identify. It wasn't iron or nickel or any element that should exist in Martian geology. When Kim's team took samples later, the lab analysis came back impossible. The metal was composed of stable isotopes that don't exist naturally in our solar system. The age dating said it was older than Mars itself, older than any planet in the solar system, and covering every surface of that chamber were symbols. Geometric patterns etched into the metal with microscopic precision. Perfect circles, spirals, angles that seemed to shift and change when you looked at them too long, making your eyes hurt and your head swim. But that wasn't the incredible part. That first chamber was just the beginning. Beyond it were more. Dozens of them. Hundreds. A vast underground complex that stretched for miles beneath the Martian surface, all connected by perfectly circular tunnels that ran straight as arrows through solid rock. Architecture that was millions of years old, built by something that wasn't human, preserved in the cold, dry environment of Mars, like a time capsule waiting to be opened. They'd found a city, an actual alien city buried beneath Mars, and it had been there long before Earth had even cooled enough for oceans to form. Kim went deeper with his team, and they spent 6 hours exploring the upper chambers, taking photographs, video, samples of everything they could reach. They found rooms that might have been living spaces, areas that could have been work areas or gathering halls, and everywhere those symbols covering every surface like some kind of written language or instruction manual. Then, at the 6-hour mark, Kim's video transmission stopped. The audio kept coming through, but no more video. For 20 minutes there was only audio of their mission, Kim breathing heavily, getting faster, someone crying quietly. Another voice, one of the younger engineers, saying "Oh my God" over and over, like a prayer or a mantra. When Kim resumed video transmission, they were standing in a massive central chamber at least 100 meters across, and in the middle of it was a structure that made everyone back on Earth watching the feed go silent. It was cylindrical, 20 feet tall, maybe 6 feet in diameter, made of the same impossible metal as the walls, but covered in symbols that seemed to move, to flow across the surface like water, and it was humming. You could hear it on the audio feed, a deep, resonant tone that was felt more than heard, vibrating in your chest and bones. "It's warm," Kim said, and his voice was full of wonder and terror. He reached out slowly, and everyone watching held their breath when his hand made contact with the surface of the cylinder. Every light in the colony went out instantly, simultaneously. Power, backup power, emergency lighting, everything. The video feed cut to black. The audio went to static. For 3 seconds that felt like 3 hours, Mars Base Alpha was completely dark and silent. Then the lights came back on, all of them, all at once, like someone had thrown a switch. But something had changed. You could feel it even through the video feed, even across 50 million miles of space. Something was different now. The cylinder had stopped humming. Kim's hand was still touching it, but now his eyes were wide and he was trembling. He pulled his hand back slowly and looked at his team. "Did you feel that?" he whispered. Nobody answered. They just stared at him. 3 of his team members were crying. 1 was smiling. Kim looked into the camera, looked directly at all of us watching back on Earth, and said 5 words that still haunt me. "They've been waiting for us." That's when the disappearances started. Eric Hammond was a maintenance technician. 34 years old, former Navy, married with 2 kids back on Earth. On February 27th, he went to check a pressure valve in one of the peripheral tunnels on the colony's eastern edge. Routine work, 5-minute job. He'd done it 100 times already since landing. He took his toolkit, signed out on the duty log, and walked down the tunnel towards the valve station. He never came back. When he didn't return after an hour, his supervisor sent someone to check on him. They found his toolkit on the ground, tools scattered across 20 meters of tunnel. His helmet was there, sitting upright like he'd carefully placed it down, but Hammond was gone. The search team expanded, 30 people combing every tunnel, every chamber, every corner of the colony. Nothing. Then someone found his suit camera. It detached from his helmet and was still recording when they found it wedged in a crack in the tunnel wall. They recovered the footage and everyone gathered to watch it, hoping for some clue about what happened. For the first 60 minutes, everything was normal. Hammond walking through the tunnel, whistling tunelessly, checking his tablet for the valve location. His breathing steady in his helmet. He reached the valve, knelt down, started his inspection. Routine maintenance, noting readings in his log. Then, at the 60-minute mark, he stopped, just froze in the middle of tightening a bolt. He tilted his head like he was listening to something. Then, slowly, he stood up. He turned away from the valve and started walking. Not back toward the colony. Deeper. Into tunnels that weren't on any colony map. Into areas they hadn't explored yet. At minute 65, he was moving faster. Almost running. His breathing was getting faster too, excited. At minute 71, he started talking. But there was no one else visible in the camera frame. No one else on his radio channel. He was alone in that tunnel, but he was having a conversation. "Yes," he said. "Yes, I understand. I can feel it now. I remember." A pause like he was listening to a response. "I know. I'm sorry it took so long. I'm coming." Another pause. "I'll bring the others. I'll tell them. They need to remember too." At minute 73, the camera signal went to static. The last frame before it cut out showed Hammond's gloved hand, reaching towards something in the darkness ahead of him. Something the camera couldn't quite resolve. Something that reflected light in ways that didn't make sense. Then, nothing. Just static. They never found his body. They never found any trace of him except his equipment, abandoned in that tunnel, like he'd simply walked out of his suit and kept going. 2 days later, Laura Stevens vanished from the greenhouse. The greenhouse was supposed to be the safest place in the colony. It was a sealed environment with only 2 exits, both monitored by security cameras, both requiring keycard access. Laura was a botanist, 42 years old, passionate about her work, mother to an 8-year-old daughter named Sophie. She was checking on the tomato plants at 10:15 p.m, making notes on their growth rates under Martian conditions. The security footage showed her moving between the rows, touching leaves gently, smiling at how well everything was growing. At 10:17 p.m, she paused near the back of the greenhouse, standing among the tomato plants. She was looking at something, her head tilted in that same listening posture Hammond had shown. At 10:22 p.m, she was gone, not walking toward the exits, just gone. One frame she was there, standing in the tomato row. The next frame, 5 seconds later, the row was empty. Both security cameras caught it. Both showed the same impossible thing. Laura Stevens simply ceased to be in the greenhouse between one heartbeat and the next. Her daughter Sophie told the colony counsellor the next day that her mother had gone to talk to the architects, that they'd called her because they wanted to show her something beautiful, something important. When the counsellor gently asked who the architects were, Sophie looked at her like she'd asked a stupid question. "The ones who built everything," Sophie said, "the ones who made us. They live down in the deep places, and they've been waiting for us to come home." The counsellor asked how Sophie knew this. "They told me," Sophie said simply. "They tell all of us. Don't you hear them?" That word. Architects. Nobody had used it in any briefing or conversation. It wasn't in any mission document or geological report. But all the children knew it. When the psychologists interviewed them separately over the next few days, every single one of the 43 children mentioned the architects. They described them in consistent detail. Tall, taller than any human. Not quite solid, like they were made of light and shadow at the same time. Ancient. Kind. Patient. Waiting. The children weren't scared. That was the most disturbing part. They talked about the architects the way you'd talk about loving grandparents. Familiar. Safe. Like coming home after a long time away. Colonel Walsh ordered an immediate lockdown on February 28th. No one was permitted into the tunnel systems without armed escort and explicit authorization from him personally. All the entrances to the deeper chambers were sealed with steel blast doors, welded shut, with guards posted at each one. Shifts were doubled. Everyone went on a buddy system. No one was allowed to be alone anywhere in the colony. Walsh's orders were clear and his tone was grim. Whatever was happening, they were going to contain it until they understood it. But you could hear the fear underneath his military discipline. This wasn't an enemy you could fight. This wasn't a problem engineering could solve. It didn't matter. The precautions didn't matter. On March 5th, power fluctuations started affecting life support. Lights flickering, temperature controls cycling randomly, air pressure dropping and rising in different sections of the colony. The engineering team investigated immediately, thinking it was the system failures or damage from the Martian environment. What they found was worse. Someone had been accessing the colony's computer system, opening sealed doors, changing environmental controls, overriding safety protocols. But the access logs showed no user activity, no passwords entered, no login attempts. The commands were just appearing in the system, executed from nowhere, from nothing. The blast doors that had been welded shut were opening, from the inside, from behind 12 inches of steel and reinforced bolts, where no one could possibly be. Guards would hear the sound of metal groaning, would watch the blast doors swing open slowly and find empty tunnels beyond. No explanation. No rational way for it to happen. They'd weld the doors shut again, post double guards, install motion sensors, and the next night the doors would be open again. Robert Novak, the head of colony security, former Marine with 20 years of experience, made in his final log entry on March 11th at 4:30 in the morning. I've listened to it more than 100 times. His voice is steady, professional, controlled, but underneath it, you can hear the fear, the resignation. The children can hear them, he said, speaking directly into his recorder. All of them. 43 kids hearing the same voices, receiving the same messages. They say the architects are calling everyone home. They use that word specifically. Home. Not Mars, not the colony. Home. Like this is where we're supposed to be. Where we've always been supposed to be. The kids aren't scared. That's what terrifies me. They're happy about it. They talk about remembering things they couldn't possibly know. Sophie Stevens told me yesterday that she remembers when Mars had oceans. She described them in detail, the colour of the water, the sound of waves. She's 8 years old and has never left Earth until this mission, but she remembers Martian oceans that dried up 3 billion years ago. Novak paused on the recording, and you can hear him breathing, trying to stay calm. 3 more people disappeared last night. One of them was my second in command, Lieutenant Barnes. I've known him for 12 years, solid, reliable. I watched him walk into the deep tunnels at 2:30 a.m. Just walked right past me while I was standing guard. I called his name. He turned and looked at me, and his eyes were glowing, faintly, but definitely glowing. Blue-white light, like the light we saw in the tunnels. He smiled at me. He said, "It's okay, Bob. They're not taking us. We're going to them. Come see. Come remember." Then he kept walking. I tried to follow him, but after 50 meters, the tunnel just ended. Solid rock wall. But Barnes was gone. I heard his voice from beyond the wall, calling back to me. "Come home, Bob, come home." I ran back to the colony and locked myself in my office, and I don't know what to do anymore. The log ends there. Robert Novak disappeared that night. They found his uniform folded neatly on his office chair the next morning. His sidearm was placed on top of the uniform, fully loaded, never fired. Bob Novak walked into the tunnels wearing nothing but his base layer clothing and was never seen again. By March 15th, 23 colonists had vanished. The colony's population had dropped from 200 to 177 in just over 2 weeks. And the worst part was that people were starting to volunteer, starting to ask when it would be their turn. The psychological breakdown was spreading faster than any disease. Colonists who'd been model citizens, rational scientists and engineers, were now spending hours sitting by the blast doors waiting, hoping to hear the call, hoping to be chosen. Colonel Raymond Walsh held out longer than most. He maintained discipline, kept running the colony, kept filing reports back to Earth even though the responses from NASA were increasingly desperate and unhelpful. What could they do from 50 million miles away? What advice could they give for a situation that made no sense? But on March 15th, at 4:19 in the morning, Walsh made his final video log. I've watched it so many times I can recite it from memory. He's sitting alone in his quarters. He looks exhausted. His eyes are red from lack of sleep. But there's something else in his expression too. Wonder. Anticipation. "I have to see," he says, looking directly into the camera. "We all have to see. I've been resisting it. Thought I was stronger than the others. Thought my military discipline could overcome whatever psychological effect is at work here. But it's not a psychological effect. It's not mass hysteria or contamination or any rational explanation. They're real. The architects are real, and they're showing us things. Every night, when I close my eyes, I see it. The history of Mars. The history of us. We didn't evolve on Earth. We started here. Billions of years ago, we lived on Mars. We built cities, we had a civilization that spanned the solar system, and then something happened. Some catastrophe. We had to leave, we had to start over. Earth was the refuge, the backup plan. And we forgot. Over millions of years, we forgot where we came from." Walsh stood up, and you could see his hands were shaking. The architects stayed behind. They waited. In the deep places beneath the surface, protected from the disaster that stripped Mars of its atmosphere and water. They've been waiting for us to advance enough, to remember enough, to come back. And now we're here, and they're calling us home. They're helping us remember what we are, where we came from. He moved toward the door of his quarters. "I'm going down. I have to see it for myself. I have to stand in front of them and remember. God help me, it's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. And I haven't even seen it yet. Just the glimpses. Just the echoes of memory they're sending. If this is wrong, if I'm losing my mind, then I've already lost it. But I don't think I am. I think this is the sanest thing I've ever done." He looked back at the camera one last time. "Tell Emily I love her. Tell my wife I love her. Tell everyone back home that we're not dying here. We're becoming what we were always meant to be." Then he walked out. The camera kept recording his empty quarters for another 6 hours until someone finally turned it off. They found his uniform at the entrance to the deepest explored chamber, the one with the cylinder, neatly folded, his colonel's insignia placed on top. Colonel Raymond Walsh walked into the darkness wearing nothing at all and never came back. Douglas Grant, the deputy director, took command of the remaining 127 colonists. He was a civilian administrator, not military, and he was terrified. He made that clear in his first transmission as acting director. "I don't know what I'm doing," he said honestly. "I'm not qualified for this, but Walsh is gone. And I'm what you've got. I'm ordering immediate evacuation preparations. The backup ship can hold 60 people. It was supposed to be an emergency lifeboat, never used. Well, this is an emergency. We're leaving. I don't care what orders say. I don't care about the mission objectives. I'm getting as many people off this rock as I can." But as Grant and his team prepped the evacuation ship over the next 48 hours, something happened that shattered everyone's remaining hope. The children started speaking in unison. All 43 of them scattered throughout the colony in their various quarters and common areas. At exactly 8:15 p.m. on March 18th, every child stopped what they were doing and spoke the same words at the same time. Not shouting, not distressed, just calmly stating fact in perfect synchronization. "Don't be afraid. They're not taking us. We're going to them. It's beautiful there. We want to go home." Parents ran to their children, found them standing still, eyes closed, smiling peacefully. When the children opened their eyes, they were glowing with that same blue-white light that others had shown before disappearing. The glow faded after a few seconds, but the children were changed. They started walking, all of them, moving towards the tunnel entrances, moving toward the blast doors that led to the deep chambers. Parents tried to stop them, picked them up, locked them in their rooms, but the children just smiled with infinite patience and said, "It's okay. We remember now. We remember what we are. Don't you want to remember too?" That night, 15 children sleepwalked out of locked rooms. Their parents found the doors standing open in the morning. Not forced, not broken, just open. The children were gone. Found later by search teams standing in a circle around the cylinder in the deep chamber, holding hands, singing something that wasn't any language anyone recognized but somehow felt familiar. When their parents tried to bring them back, the children just looked at them with those ancient eyes and said, "Come with us, come home." 6 parents did. Just walked into the circle with their children and vanished. Dissolved into light and shadow according to the one security guard who witnessed it and immediately resigned his post and locked himself in his quarters until the final evacuation attempt. Douglas Grant made the hardest decision of his life on March 20th. He couldn't save everyone. The ship held 60 people maximum, and there were still 112 colonists alive. He announced that essential personnel would evacuate first. Engineers, doctors, scientists who could testify to what happened here. He asked for volunteers to stay behind, to maintain communications with Earth, to keep transmitting data until rescue missions could be organized. 30 people volunteered immediately. Good people, brave people, people who understood they were probably condemning themselves but wanted to give others a chance to escape. The evacuation ship powered up on March 21st, engines hot, life support online, fuel cells charged. Grant sent the final passenger list to Earth. 60 names, 37 adults, 23 children. The youngest was 4 years old. The oldest was 62. They loaded supplies. They ran final system checks. Everything was green. They were 45 minutes from launch when the engines shut down. All of them. Main engines, backup engines, maneuvering thrusters. Everything went dark and cold and dead. The engineering team swarmed the ship. They found the problem in 20 minutes. Someone had sabotaged the ignition system. From the inside, carefully, precisely, cutting specific wires and rerouting control systems so the engines would initialize but never actually fire. It would take at least a week to repair, and they didn't have the right replacement parts. They'd have to fabricate them, and that assumed whoever did the sabotage didn't do it again. Grant ordered an investigation, wanted to know who had sabotaged their only escape route, but as the interviews began, people started disappearing. Not mysteriously, not vanishing in the night. They just walked away. In the middle of conversations, in the middle of tasks, They'd stop, smile peacefully, and walk towards the tunnels. One of Grant's own security team did it right in front of him. Lieutenant Morrison, loyal, dedicated, had been working 18-hour days trying to keep the colony functional. She was giving Grant a status report when she stopped mid-sentence. She looked at him with those glowing eyes and said, "They're calling me now. I can hear them so clearly. They're showing me what we were, what we can be again. Don't you want to see, Douglas? Don't you want to remember?" "No," Grant said, backing away from her. "No, I don't. I want to go home. Earth. Real home." Morrison smiled sadly. "This is real home. Earth was the exile. We've been away so long we forgot, but they remember. They kept the memories safe for us." She turned and walked away. Grant tried to follow her, tried to stop her, but she moved with purpose down corridor after corridor until she reached the deepest accessible tunnel. She walked into the darkness, and the darkness swallowed her like water. Within 3 hours, everyone who'd volunteered to stay behind had vanished. All 30 of them. They didn't say goodbye, didn't leave notes, just left. Joined the others in the deep places. Grant was now in command of 82 colonists, trapped on Mars with no way home, and no way to stop people from walking into the alien darkness. On March 22nd, Grant realized the terrible truth. He was watching security footage, trying to understand the pattern of disappearances, trying to find some way to predict or prevent them. And he noticed something. Everyone who'd gone into the deep chambers in those first few weeks, everyone who'd seen the cylinder, everyone who'd touched it or been close to it, they all came back. They didn't vanish immediately. They came back to the colony, walked around, talked to people, acted almost normal. But their eyes were different, distant, peaceful. And slowly, one by one, they'd start convincing others. Not forcing, not threatening, just talking. Sharing what they'd seen, explaining what the architects had shown them. And the people they talked to would go down to see for themselves. And they'd come back changed too. It was spreading like a virus, but it wasn't a virus. It was knowledge, understanding, memory. And once you had it, once you understood, you wanted to share it. You wanted everyone to understand. You wanted everyone to come home. Grant looked at the footage of himself from 3 days ago. He'd gone down into the first chamber to inspect it, trying to understand what was drawing people there. He'd stood in front of that cylinder for maybe 30 seconds before his security team pulled him back, insisting it wasn't safe. 30 seconds. And now, watching himself on the recording, he could see his eyes starting to glow, just faintly. Just for a moment when he looked directly at the cylinder. He'd been infected too, or enlightened. He wasn't sure which word applied anymore. By March 24th, only 17 colonists remained who hadn't gone into the deep chambers. 17 people who were still, by any definition, fully human. Grant was one of them, though he could feel the pull getting stronger every day. The whispers in his mind during the night. The dreams of ancient Mars with its blue oceans and green valleys. The memories that weren't his memories but felt more real than his actual childhood. At 9:47 p.m. Mars time on March 24th, Douglas Grant made the final transmission from Mars Base Alpha. He sat alone in the command center, surrounded by blinking lights and monitoring stations that no longer mattered. The colony was still functioning. Power, water, air circulation, temperature control, all the automated systems running perfectly. But there was no one left to use them except 17 scared, isolated people waiting for the inevitable. "There are 17 of us left," Grant said, and his voice was steady but hollow. "Everyone else went willingly. I need Earth to understand that. No one was taken by force, no one was killed. They chose to go. I've watched the footage. I've seen it happen dozens of times now. They walk into the darkness with smiles on their faces. They're not being coerced. They're not being controlled. They're remembering something, and once they remember, they want to be part of it. They want to go home to whatever's down there in those chambers. Grant leaned closer to the camera. His face was gaunt. He'd lost at least 20 pounds since landing. His eyes were sunken but bright. Too bright. I've watched my chief engineer come back from the deep tunnels. Dr. Ramona Ellis. Brilliant woman. We were friends. She went down 3 days ago, said she just needed to see it once. Needed to understand. She was gone for 6 hours. When she came back, she was glowing. Not her clothes, her skin, her eyes. Internal light bleeding through her pores. She found me in my office and took my hands, and her skin was warm. Fever warm. She looked at me with such compassion, such love, and she said, "Douglas." They showed me where we came from. They showed me the beginning. Mars was the cradle. 4 billion years ago, before Earth even had life, Mars had us. We built cities that touched the clouds. We travelled to the stars. We were magnificent. She started crying. And then the sun changed. Solar winds stripped our atmosphere. The oceans boiled away. We had to evacuate. Took our DNA, our knowledge, our potential, and seeded Earth. Started over from single cells. Waited for evolution to bring us back to intelligence. The architects stayed behind. Went deep underground where they could survive. Maintained the facilities. Kept the memories. Waited for us to advance enough to come home. And now we're here, and they're so happy. They've been alone for so long, Douglas. They've been waiting for us for so long. Grant pulled his hands free from the memory and wrapped his arms around himself. She tried to get me to come with her. Said the architects wanted to show me too. Wanted me to remember. I refused. Locked myself in the command center. But I can feel it now. The pull, the call. It's not voices exactly, it's feeling. Belonging. Purpose. Like there's a hole inside me that I never knew existed. And down there in the deep chambers is the thing that fits perfectly into that hole. The thing I've been missing my entire life without knowing it. He stood up and walked to the window. Mars stretched out before him, red and dead and ancient. I don't know if this is first contact or psychological warfare or some kind of alien assimilation. I don't know if the architects are benevolent or hostile or something beyond those categories. What I do know is that 200 people came to Mars, and 183 of them are gone now, converted, transformed, merged with something we don't understand, and the rest of us won't last much longer. The pull is too strong. He turned back to the camera. I'm going down. I have to. I can't fight it anymore. Every second I spend up here, the whispers get louder. The memories get stronger. I close my eyes and see ancient Mars. I see the civilization we built. I see the catastrophe that destroyed it. I see the desperate evacuation. I see the architects making the choice to stay behind, to preserve everything, to wait. 4 billion years they've waited. And now I'm going to go down there and find out if what they're showing me is true. If it's real. If Mars was really our home and Earth was just a temporary refuge where we forgot ourselves. Douglas Grant walked to the door of the command center. He paused with his hand on the frame and looked back at the camera one final time. If you're receiving this, send no one else. Don't send rescue missions. Don't send investigations. Don't send anyone until you understand what this is. This is bigger than exploration. This is bigger than first contact. This is remembering. This is coming home. They've been waiting for us. For longer than human civilization has existed. They've been waiting. And I think we've been waiting too. Waiting to remember. Waiting to come back. Waiting to be whole again. He left the command center at 10:34 p.m. The camera kept recording the empty room for another 8 hours before the automated systems shut it down to conserve power. Douglas Grant's uniform was found 2 days later by one of the final 17 colonists. It was folded neatly at the entrance to the central chamber, placed beside the glowing cylinder, like an offering. Grant was never seen again. For 48 hours after that final transmission, there was silence from Mars. No communications, no telemetry. The automated systems kept functioning, kept sending technical data about power levels and environmental status, but no human voices, no video, nothing. On March 27th, NASA's satellite surveillance of Mars turned its cameras toward Valles Marineris. The images came back crisp and clear. Mars Base Alpha was intact, no damage visible. The habitats were sealed, the solar panels were clean and collecting power. The nuclear reactor was running at optimal levels. Everything looked perfect. Except that there were no people, no movement in any of the modules, no lights in the residential sections. The colony was functioning perfectly without any colonists to run it. 3 days later, on March 30th, 1984, Project Lazarus was officially terminated. A meeting was convened at NASA headquarters, the same 15 people who'd authorized the mission 8 years earlier. The man in the dark suit was there too, looking older and infinitely tired. He stood at the head of the table and said simply, "It's over. Project Lazarus is classified at the highest possible level. Every document, every recording, every piece of evidence will be sealed. Everyone in this room will sign non-disclosure agreements that extend beyond death. Violation will be considered treason and prosecuted to the fullest extent, up to and including execution." I signed, we all signed. What choice did we have? The families of the colonists were already being notified. Most were given death certificates dated March 1st, 1984, before the disappearances even began, before anyone had vanished into the Martian tunnels. The official story was a catastrophic systems failure during the initial landing. Explosion. Everyone killed instantly. No survivors, no bodies recoverable. Due to the nature of the accident and the harsh Martian environment, 17 families received sealed coffins to bury. The coffins were empty. They buried empty boxes in the ground and grieved for people who were still alive, changed beyond recognition, living in ancient chambers beneath the red planet. But some of us knew the truth. Some of us couldn't let it go. Thomas Much had died 3 years before the mission even launched. October 6th, 1980. Climbing accident in the Himalayas. He was 49 years old, experienced climber, careful and methodical. He fell from a ridge that he'd climbed successfully twice before. Some people whispered that it wasn't an accident, that he'd seen too much in those Cydonia images, that he had written reports predicting exactly what would happen when humans encountered the structures beneath Mars. Reports that were too accurate, too prescient. Reports that got him killed. I found one of those reports in 1985, misfiled in an archive that was supposed to be destroyed. It was dated March 1980, 6 months before Much died. The report was titled Contact Scenario Analysis for Cydonia Structures. In it, Much wrote, "If the structures in Cydonia are what we believe them to be, then Mars is not a dead world. It is waiting. The subsurface tunnels suggest habitation, preservation, purpose. Whatever built those structures intended them to last, intended them to be found. When we arrive, we will not be explorers. We will be the ones being explored, the ones being evaluated, the ones being called home." I believe that Mars was once inhabited by our evolutionary ancestors. I believe that a catastrophic event forced evacuation to Earth. I believe that something stayed behind. And I believe that when we return, we will be invited to remember what we were, what we could be again. This is not a warning. This is not a threat. This is an invitation written in stone and metal and waiting patience that spans geological time. We should accept the invitation. We should go. But we should understand that the humans who go to Mars may not return as humans. They may return as something more, something that remembers. 3 months after writing that report, Thomas Much was dead. I don't believe in coincidences anymore. Over the next 30 years, there were 4 secret missions back to Mars Base Alpha, all robotic, all classified, all attempting to understand what happened to the 200 colonists who vanished into the darkness. The first mission launched in 1987, a small probe designed to land near the colony and investigate the site. It sent back telemetry for 3 days as it approached Mars. Then, 2 miles from the colony, the signal cut out. No warning, no malfunction detected, just silence. The probe never re-established contact. The second mission launched in 1994. More advanced technology, better cameras and sensors, better communications equipment. This probe managed to land successfully and deployed a small rover. For 14 seconds, it transmitted video footage. Those 14 seconds changed everything we thought we knew. The footage showed Mars Base Alpha. The colony was lit up. Lights on in every module. The airlock doors were cycling, opening and closing, like the colony was still inhabited, and people were coming and going. But there were no people visible. No movement except the doors. The camera panned across the habitat modules and caught something that made everyone watching go cold. Shapes in the windows. Human-sized shapes standing motionless inside the modules, backlit by the interior lights. Standing in perfect geometric arrangements. Circles and triangles and formations that meant something, but we couldn't understand what. Then the signal cut out and the rover went silent forever. The third mission in 2003 was designed specifically to photograph those shapes in the windows. It succeeded. The probe landed 100 meters from the colony and had 30 minutes of operational time before its batteries died. In those 30 minutes, it transmitted a single high-resolution image. That image is locked in a classified server that requires 3 separate authorizations to access. I've seen it twice. Once in 2004 and once in 2015. Both times I had nightmares for weeks afterward. The image shows the interior of one of the residential modules through a window. There are people inside, at least 20 of them. They're standing in a perfect circle, facing inward, holding hands. Their eyes are open and glowing with that blue-white light that the final logs described. Their mouths are open too, like they're singing or chanting, but there's no sound captured. And behind them, in the shadows at the edge of the image, there are other shapes, taller shapes. The architects, maybe, or something else entirely. The resolution isn't good enough to make out details, but you can see they're there, watching, waiting. The people in the circle are smiling. They look peaceful, happy even. They've been standing like that for 19 years, and the image suggests they'll be standing like that forever. The fourth and final mission was in 2018. This one was different. It was designed not just to observe, but to retrieve. The probe carried a small robotic arm and sample containers. It was supposed to collect artifacts from the colony. Proof that Project Lazarus had existed. Evidence that could be studied back on Earth. The mission was successful. The probe landed, deployed its arm, entered one of the habitat modules through an airlock that opened for it like the colony had been expecting visitors, and retrieved a single artifact. The probe returned to Earth 6 months later. The sample container was opened in a classified facility beneath the Nevada desert, the same facility where Endeavour Station had been built. Inside was a metallic sphere, about 8 inches in diameter, covered in the same geometric symbols that decorated the walls of the Martian chambers. The sphere was warm to the touch, not hot, but blood warm, like it was alive. It weighed almost nothing, maybe 2 pounds, despite being solid metal, and it hummed. that same deep, resonant tone that Russell Kim had described in his final video from the central chamber. A tone you felt in your bones more than heard with your ears. I was brought in as part of the analysis team. I'm a propulsion engineer, not a materials scientist, but they wanted everyone who'd worked on Project Lazarus to examine the sphere. Maybe they thought we'd recognize something. Maybe they just wanted us all complicit in whatever came next. I held that sphere in my hands for maybe 30 seconds. It was one of the most profound experiences of my life. The moment my skin touched the metal, I felt something. A presence. Intelligence, ancient and vast and patient. And I heard whispers. Not words exactly, concepts, feelings. Memories that weren't mine. I saw Mars with blue skies and green oceans. I saw cities of crystal, a metal stretching from horizon to horizon. I saw people who looked almost human, but weren't quite. Their eyes too large and too bright. Their limbs slightly elongated, moving with grace that seemed to defy physics. I saw the sun expanding, growing angry, spitting radiation that stripped Mars of its atmosphere over centuries. I saw the desperate evacuation. Ships leaving by the thousands, carrying genetic material and knowledge and hope to the blue planet in the inner orbit. Earth, the refuge, the backup plan. And I saw the volunteers who stayed behind, the ones who chose to remain on Mars, to go deep underground where they could survive, to maintain the facilities and wait for the evacuees to evolve on Earth, to build new civilizations, to develop technology, to eventually come back home. They waited for 4 billion years. Patient, eternal, believing that someday, somehow, their distant descendants would return, would remember, would come home. When I let go of the sphere, I was crying. I don't know when I'd started. The technicians took it from me carefully and placed it in a containment vessel. I was escorted out of the facility and debriefed for 6 hours. They asked me what I'd experienced. I told them everything. They asked me if I wanted to go to Mars. I said yes before I could stop myself. They asked me why. I couldn't explain it. Just a feeling of belonging, of purpose, of something incomplete inside me that could only be made whole by going home to Mars. They thanked me for my honesty and told me I was no longer permitted to work on anything related to Mars exploration. My security clearances were revoked that same day. I was retired with full pension and a reminder that my non-disclosure agreements were still in effect. 7 different laboratories have analysed that sphere over the past 7 years. They all agree on a few facts. The metal is composed of stable isotopes that don't exist naturally in our solar system. The age dating is impossible, the isotope ratios suggesting it's older than the solar system itself, which violates everything we know about planetary formation. The symbols on the surface are not random. They encode information at multiple scales, fractal patterns that repeat at microscopic and macroscopic levels. No one has decoded the information yet, but everyone agrees. It's there. Language or mathematics or something beyond both. And the sphere is warm, always warm. It maintains a constant temperature of 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit, regardless of the environment around it. Human body temperature. Like it's alive. Like it's waiting. Current Mars missions continue, and they're finding things that terrify the people who know what happened in 1984. The Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter has been in orbit since 2006, taking high-resolution images of the Martian surface. In 2019, during a routine survey of Valles Marineris, it detected thermal signatures beneath the Cydonia region. Heat sources at depths of 2 kilometers, exactly where the colony's ground-penetrating radar showed the chamber systems. The thermal signatures pulse, regular intervals of 41 hours. Pulse, fade, like a heartbeat, like something alive and breathing beneath the Martian surface. The official explanation is residual geological activity. radioactive decay in the rocks, thermal venting from the planet's interior. Nobody believes those explanations. The patterns are too regular, too consistent, too much like intention. The European Space Agency's Mars Express has been orbiting Mars since 2003. In 2020, its radio equipment picked up unusual signals emanating from the Cydonia region. Faint electromagnetic pulses in radio frequencies that don't match any known natural phenomena. When the signals are run through analysis software, patterns emerge. Not random noise, not geological interference, structure, repetition, intelligence. The signals occur most frequently at night, Mars local time. During the hours when the colony's logs reported the strongest psychological effects, the hours when people heard the call most clearly. The signals have been recorded and studied by communications experts, linguists, cryptographers. No one can decode them, but everyone agrees they mean something. They're saying something, and whatever is sending those signals has been sending them for at least the past 5 years, continuously, maybe longer, maybe since 1984, maybe since long before humans even existed. And then last year something happened that made me finally decide to break my silence, to tell this story despite the consequences, despite the non-disclosure agreements and the threats of prosecution. Because I'm 78 years old and I don't have many years left, and this secret is too important to die with me. Last year, an amateur radio operator in Perth, Australia, named David Chen, was scanning frequencies late at night. Just a hobby. He likes listening to satellite transmissions, number stations, anything interesting he can pick up with his homemade equipment. On the night of August 15th, 2024, at 3:47 AM local time, his equipment picked up something odd. A signal that shouldn't have been there, too strong to be a satellite, wrong frequency for any terrestrial broadcast. He recorded it automatically because that's what his equipment does. Records everything just in case. He didn't listen to the recording until the next day. When he did, he posted about it on amateur radio forums, asking if anyone could identify the source. Someone forwarded it to a NASA contractor who recognized the implications and forwarded it up the chain. Within 48 hours, David Chen's house was visited by men in dark suits who confiscated his equipment, his recordings, and made him sign documents he didn't fully understand. But by then, he'd already uploaded the recording to 3 different file-sharing sites. It spread. People made copies. It's out there now, floating around the internet, mostly ignored because it sounds like static and noise. But if you know what you're listening for, if you clean up the signal and filter out the interference, you can hear it. Voices. Multiple voices speaking in unison through 50 million miles of space. I've heard the recording. I've listened to it 100 times, headphones on, volume up, trying to convince myself I'm wrong. But I'm not wrong. The voices say, "We're still here. We're waiting. Come home." Over and over, a loop that repeats every 41 hours. The same interval as the thermal pulses beneath Cydonia. The same timing as when the colony reported the strongest effects. Voice analysis was done by 3 independent laboratories, none of them knowing what they were analysing or where the recording came from. Just asked to identify the speakers if possible. All 3 laboratories came back with the same result. The primary voice in the recording, the clearest one, matches colony linguist Dr. Rebecca Morrison. 97% certainty. Probability of error less than 1 in 10,000. Rebecca Morrison vanished into the Martian tunnels on March 15th, 1984. 41 years ago, she was 36 years old. She'd be 77 now if she aged normally, but that voice in the recording doesn't sound 77. It sounds exactly like the voice in her mission logs from February 1984. Young, strong, clear, unchanged. She's still there. After 41 years, she's still on Mars, still alive in some form we don't understand, still transmitting, still calling, still saying come home. NASA is planning a manned mission to Mars The Artemis program is supposed to return humans to the moon by 2026, and Mars is the next goal. They're talking about 2033, 2035 at the latest. 50 years after Project Lazarus, a crew of 12 astronauts initially, with plans to establish a permanent base by 2040. They're going to Jezero Crater, not Valles Marineris, not Cydonia. Officially, they're avoiding that region because of rough terrain and landing difficulties. But I know the real reason. They're terrified of what's there. Terrified that another crew will vanish, like the first one. Terrified that whatever happened in 1984 will happen again. I've tried to warn them. I've sent anonymous letters to NASA administrators, to members of Congress who oversee space policy, to journalists who cover the space program. Nobody listens. Why would they? I'm a crazy old man talking about secret colonies and underground aliens. I have no proof they'll accept. The documents I kept are classified. The recordings I have were stolen. If I went public officially, I'd be arrested before I finished speaking. Charged with treason. Maybe worse, but I had to try. I had to tell someone, so I'm telling you. I'm recording this testimony, and I'm leaving instructions that it be released when I die. Maybe people will believe it. Maybe they won't. Maybe it doesn't matter anymore because what's been set in motion can't be stopped. Last month, something arrived at my house that made my decision final. An envelope, no return address, no postage, just my name written in careful block letters. Inside was a single photograph, 8 by 10, high quality, glossy paper. The image showed rock formations on Mars. Standard geology. Nothing unusual at first glance, the kind of image that gets released in press packets thousands at a time. Forgettable and mundane. But I looked closely because I always look closely now. And in the bottom right corner of the image, partially obscured by a shadow, there was something that didn't belong. A footprint. Human-sized. The tread pattern clearly visible in the Martian dust. Fresh. Defined edges. Not worn by wind. The metadata on the back of the photograph said it was taken by the Perseverance rover on Sol 1247 of its mission. 3 months ago, in Jezero Crater, miles from Valles Marineris, miles from where the colony landed. But there it was, a human footprint where no human should be. No. On the back of the photograph, someone had written a single word in red ink, home. I don't know who sent it. I don't know how they got a classified image from Perseverance's cameras. I don't know if the footprint is real or doctored or some kind of message I'm too old and scared to understand. But I know what it means. They're still there, the 200 colonists of Mars Base Alpha. After 41 years, they're still there. Still alive. Still moving around on the Martian surface. Still part of whatever they found in those deep chambers beneath Cydonia. And they want us to join them. They're reaching out across the solar system, sending messages, leaving signs, calling us home. The architects aren't hostile. They're not conquering or destroying. They're welcoming, inviting, reminding us of something we've forgotten, something about who we are and where we came from, something that terrifies me even as part of me desperately wants to believe it. I'm 78 years old. I have lung cancer. The doctors give me maybe a year if I'm lucky. I'm not going to see humans return to Mars. I'm not going to know if the next mission succeeds, or if they vanish, just like the first one. I'm not going to learn the truth about the architects or the ancient Martian civilization, or whether we really came from the red planet billions of years ago. I'm going to die here on Earth, carrying questions I'll never have answered, but maybe that's okay. Maybe that's better than knowing, because everyone who learned the truth, everyone who went down into those chambers and stood before the architects and understood what they were being shown, every single one of them chose to stay. Chose to become part of something we can't comprehend. Chose to stop being human, or chose to become what humans were always meant to be. I'm not sure which is worse. What I do know is this. Mars isn't empty. The red planet isn't a dead world waiting to be colonized. It's home to something ancient and patient and vast. Something that's been waiting beneath the surface for 4 billion years, waiting for us to advance enough, to remember enough, to come back. And now we're going back. We're sending more missions, more rovers, eventually more people. And when those people arrive, they're going to hear the call, just like the colonists of Mars Base Alpha heard it. They're going to feel the pull. They're going to want to go down into the deep places and see what's waiting there. And I don't think they're going to come back. At least, not as humans. The architects are calling us home. They've been calling for 41 years. And sooner or later, we're going to answer. Not because we have to, but because part of us wants to. Part of us remembers what we've forgotten. Part of us knows that Mars isn't a new frontier to explore. It's where we came from. It's where we belong. It's home. And the architects have been waiting so patiently for us to remember. They're still waiting now. 200 colonists transformed into something beyond human, standing in those ancient chambers, holding hands in geometric formations, singing in voices that carry across 50 million miles of empty space. Still there, still alive, still calling. Come home, they say. Remember, come home, and God help me, part of me wants to go.